And on stage with me, my friend and co-author, the community spiritual leader from Kansas City, Missouri, Reverend Chris Michaels.
Morning. 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 Thank you.
It is so wonderful to welcome you to Kansas City in Santa Rosa. It is so marvelous to have communities meet each other. And don't you know, when we meet other communities, worlds collide. Now we have to learn, how do you do a thing? How do we do a thing? What is going to happen? And oh my goodness, that's right where compassion becomes important. Isn't that right? Got to learn each other's way. But it's okay. We're taking care of them. We've got them eating tofu and hugging redwoods. That's right. And very soon they'll be wearing Birkenstocks and plaid shirts, and we're happy. I also want to thank all of you for giving us the questions. Because we asked for questions to support us in talking to you about one human family and the idea of compassion, and we got literally hundreds of questions. And so Reverend Chris and I have been sorting through them and finding that they really do divide into some significant key themes. And what we're going to do today is attempt to answer many of those themes, because we can't go through all of the hundreds of questions. And we'll just try our best to capture the spirit of what you were asking about compassion.
So I like to do this in my own center because it allows me to just really take the pulse of what's happening in your hearts and in your minds by answering your questions directly. And I thank you for putting them anonymous so that we can actually be truthful here in our answers. Because if we know you, we don't want to edit, you know. Okay, so this is a good question. It says, how do we balance compassion when assisting and supporting others and making sure our own needs are met? That's a very, very good question. And it spoke to my heart specifically because 25 years ago when I walked into a center like this, I was so inspired by what was happening here that I wanted to become a minister. And so I started the church in Kansas City in 1990. And starting a church is a phenomenal experience. It requires a great deal of effort and energy. And I found myself really doing lots of things. I did the Sunday program. I was vacuuming on Saturday nights. I was setting up the chairs. I was doing a lot of stuff myself. And until one day I got really angry. I found myself being angry. And I looked around because no one was helping me. No one was supporting me. No one was there but me just doing all this stuff. And I was confiding in one of my congregants one day, and he said to me, well, Reverend Chris, he said, you do so many things so well, but when you do everything yourself, it communicates to us that you don't need us. And so I learned then that there is a healthy balance between taking care of my needs first so that I can be compassionate and loving and available to other people. So the message in all that is if you're not good for you, you can't be good for them.
And a lot of the questions looked at that. What is the line that you walk over where it starts becoming inappropriate, compassion? And what's the difference between compassion and empathy? And that's a really good way to begin the exploration. Compassion is an inquiry. It's an attempt to understand the emotional state of another person. But empathy is a tricky step because it's actually stepping into the shoes of the other person and can go into having the full-blown experience. And if not attached to some kind of spiritual maturity, you can lose yourself in that kind of identification with another person's experience. So when does compassion become inappropriate? Well, when it's not compassion anymore. And compassion, the key word, an attempt to understand the other person's emotional state or experience, it's often accompanied with action to alleviate suffering. And so there is this fuzzy line between the two, and it calls into play some serious skills: listening, compassionate communication, self-care, healthy boundaries, the kind of things that without them, the fuzzy line between am I taking care enough of myself and am I compassionate becomes very difficult to navigate around.
That's heavy. You ain't heavy, you're my brother. So, okay, here's a good question. It says, when is it compassion and when is it pity? there's a lot of trouble in our world today, and you can look on the TV and you can find out what's going on in Darfur, and you can feel a lot of sorrow and a lot of pity for what's happening in the world. From that perspective, I think a lot of people have their own strategy about that. Mine used to be, I'm in touch with the heart of humanity, and I don't want to feel the pain. I haven't got time for the pain. So some of us just don't want to look at it anymore. I don't want to see the TV. I don't want to see the news because it breaks my heart, and I don't want my heart to break. And so my strategy is just to avoid all of that because I feel sorry for them. And that used to work for me. And I think a lot of people have that perspective. But I took a step back and I said, you know what? I don't want to see a world in pain where the haves and the have-nots and there's a wide span between them. If I can look from the view of God, if I can see life on earth from God's view, I can see that there is all one. And no matter what condition each of us are in, no matter where we are in our spiritual growth, we are one human family on this planet, one life coming into view. And I think the view of compassion is from the view of God. It's seeing that oneness in all. And the view of pity is duality. It's seeing me over here as better than you and poor you over there. Do you understand? So I have no pity for people anymore. I have compassion because I see from the oneness of God. And that's the difference between the two. It's the view. It's the view.
That's right. The one is looking eye to eye and the other one is looking down.
Exactly.
Poor you. And that's so important. It's that fuzzy line again because, if I'm going to become compassionate and that's a concept that is associated with action, I have to really look into how I'm looking at you because then I may think I understand your point of view or your experience, but I might actually be projecting what I want for you all over your experience. And that may not be compassion. It may not even be kind. And that's one of the other questions that came up. Well, what's the difference between kindness and compassion? And there's another beautiful view. So I had to look around and I found out that kindness, a favorite word of mine, kindness was one of the knightly virtues. That was a standard for being a knight. It's an attitude towards the world. I also discovered that it's one of the 7 virtues, which are the opposite of the 7 deadly sins. And so I was looking at that and said, you know what? Kindness is the way you deal with life. So compassion, then, is the attempt to understand somebody's experience, but it doesn't mean I'll agree with you. It's the attempt to understand your emotional state of mind, but I may not make the same choices as you. It's the attempt to understand that, but I may not support what you're doing, and can I still be kind? That's the difference. Can I still be kind, even though what's going on is something I wouldn't choose for myself?
Okay, so does that work for red and blue states?
You better believe it.
All righty then. This question spoke directly to me, so thank you for whoever wrote it. It says, how can I treat an aging parent with compassion when their treatment of me has been abusive my entire life?